I'm scared. This is getting out of hand.
Relax, nobody needs to know. We can still fix this.
Fix this? How? This is not something you can hide forever.
If you tell anyone, everything will be ruined for both of us.
I can't keep this secret. It's too much already.
You don't have a choice.
No, I do. And I'm going to tell the truth.
In a busy community on the outskirts of Lagos lived a young woman named Moren. The community was not rich, but it was full of life. Children played in the dusty streets every evening. Women sat outside their houses talking and laughing while preparing food. Small shops lined the road, and everyone seemed to know everyone else. In that community, Moren was known as a quiet and respectful young woman. She was the kind of person who greeted elders politely every morning. If she passed an elderly neighbor carrying something heavy, she would quickly stop and offer help. She was not loud or proud. Instead, she was calm, gentle, and friendly. Many people in the area liked her because she never liked trouble. Moren lived with her mother and younger siblings. Life was not always easy for their family, but Moren did her best to support them. She helped her mother with house chores and sometimes sold small items to earn extra money. Even with the difficulties in her life, Moren always tried to smile. But there was one person who meant more to her than anyone outside her family. That person was her best friend, Naza. Moren and Naza had known each other for many years. They first met when they were teenagers. At the beginning, they were just two girls who lived in the same neighborhood, but over time, their friendship grew stronger. Soon they were doing almost everything together. They walked to the market together, they visited friends together. Sometimes they even wore similar clothes when attending small celebrations in the community. People who saw them often joked about their friendship. If you see Moren, you will see Naza, some neighbors would say. And if you see Naza, Moren will not be far. Their friendship looked strong and beautiful from the outside. Moren trusted Naza deeply. She shared many secrets with her. Whenever something good happened in Moren's life, Naza was the first person she told. When Moren felt sad or worried about something, she also went to Naza. Naza listened to her stories and often laughed with her. Sometimes they would sit outside Naza's house in the evening, talking about their dreams for the future. They spoke about many things. They talked about the kind of lives they hoped to live one day. They talked about marriage. They talked about having their own homes. Sometimes they even talked about leaving the community someday and finding better opportunities in the city. In those moments, their laughter filled the evening air. To Moren, Naza was more than a friend. She was like a sister. But even the closest friendships can hide things that no one sees. While Moren was gentle and humble, Naza was different. Naza loved attention. She liked dressing in expensive clothes when she could afford them. She enjoyed wearing shiny jewelry and bright makeup. Whenever she walked down the street, she liked people noticing her. Many people admired her confidence, but some people quietly believed Naza cared too much about appearances and status. Still, Moren never judged her friend. To Moren, Naza was simply the person who had always been there for her. Their friendship became well known in the community. During small gatherings or celebrations, they arrived together. When neighbors saw them walking side by side, they often smiled. Some older women even used their friendship as an example when advising younger girls. "Look at those two," they would say. "That is what true friendship looks like." Moren never imagined that anything could ever come between them. One warm evening, as the sun slowly disappeared behind the buildings, Moren walked toward Naza's house like she usually did. Children were playing football in the street nearby. A group of women sat outside chatting and laughing loudly. Moren greeted them politely as she passed. When she reached Naza's house, she found her friend sitting outside. Naza looked happy to see her. "Moren, you are late today," she said, smiling. Moren laughed softly. "My mother asked me to help her with some things before coming." The two friends sat down together and began talking. They talked about everything and nothing at the same time, just like they always did. The evening air was warm and calm. For Moren, moments like this were simple but meaningful. She felt safe. She felt happy. She believed her friendship with Naza would last forever. But sometimes, life hides its biggest storms behind peaceful moments. At that time, Moren had no idea that something new was about to enter her life. Something that would change everything. something that would turn her beautiful friendship into a story of betrayal, tragedy, and mystery. That night, as Moren sat beside her best friend laughing under the fading light of the evening, she had no idea that her life was slowly moving towards a dark and painful path, and that very soon, someone new would enter the story, someone who would change everything. That person was David, and his arrival would begin the chain of events that would lead to one of the most tragic and mysterious stories the community had ever known. After that peaceful evening, when Moren visited Naza's house, life in the community continued normally. People went about their daily activities. Children played in the streets. Women sold food by the roadside. Motorcycles passed up and down the dusty road every day. Moren continued visiting Naza almost every evening. Their friendship remained strong. Sometimes they sat outside talking for hours. Other times they walked together to buy food from nearby shops. They laughed about small things and shared stories about their daily lives. To Moren, those simple moments with Naza were some of the happiest parts of her day. But one afternoon, something new happened. When Moren arrived at Naza's house, she noticed that someone she had never seen before was sitting in the living room. The man looked older than both of them. He sat calmly, leaning back in a chair as if he felt very comfortable in the house. Moren paused for a moment, unsure who he was. Before she could ask, Naza walked into the room with a smile. "Oh, Moren, you're here," she said happily. Then she pointed toward the man sitting in the chair. "This is my brother," she said. "His name is David." Moren looked at him politely. David stood up and greeted her with a friendly smile. "Nice to meet you," he said calmly. Moren greeted him respectfully and sat down. At first, she felt shy because she was not used to talking with Naza's family members. Usually, when she visited, the two friends spent their time alone. But David seemed relaxed and friendly. He asked simple questions. "How are you today? Do you live nearby? How long have you and Naza been friends?" Moren answered politely. Soon, the small conversation became easier. David laughed easily and spoke with confidence. His voice was calm and warm, and he seemed to know how to make people feel comfortable around him. Before long, the three of them were talking together. They joked about small things happening in the neighborhood. They talked about daily life and the funny things people sometimes did in the community. Moren slowly relaxed. The evening passed peacefully. After that day, Moren began seeing David more often. Whenever she visited Naza's house, he was sometimes there. Sometimes he sat quietly listening while the two friends talked. Other times he joined their conversation. David seemed to enjoy making people laugh. He often told funny stories or made playful jokes. Moren found herself smiling more when he was around. Over time, their conversations became more natural. Sometimes, when Naza stepped away to do something in the house, David and Moren would continue talking. He asked her questions about her life. He asked about her family. He asked about the kind of future she hoped to have someday. Moren noticed that David listened carefully when she spoke. He nodded slowly and seemed interested in everything she said. This made her feel comfortable around him. Soon something else began happening. Sometimes when Moren finished visiting Naza and needed to go home, David offered to walk her part of the way. At first, she refused politely, but David insisted that it was safer not to walk alone at night. Eventually, she accepted. The road between their houses was not very far, but those short walks gave them time to talk. They spoke about simple things, sometimes about life in Lagos, sometimes about their dreams, sometimes about nothing important at all. But those small conversations slowly built something between them, trust. Moren believed David was a good person. She believed that because he was Naza's brother, he must also be someone she could trust. As the weeks passed, David became more comfortable around her. Sometimes when Moren arrived at Naza's house, he would greet her warmly. Other times he teased her gently about arriving late. Their friendship began to grow. But not everyone in the community noticed this change in the same way. Some neighbors began seeing Moren and David walking together more often. At first, people did not think much about it. After all, he was Naza's brother. But small whispers sometimes started among a few people. "Have you seen Moren walking with Naza's brother?" one woman asked quietly one afternoon. "Yes, I have seen them together a few times," another replied. Still, most people believed nothing serious was happening. Even Moren herself did not think deeply about it. To her, David was simply someone she had come to know through her best friend. But inside David's mind, things were slowly changing. He began paying more attention to Moren. He noticed her gentle personality. He noticed the way she spoke politely to elders. He noticed how kind she was to people around her. These small things made him like her more, and little by little, their conversations became longer. Sometimes, when Naza was busy with something inside the house, David and Moren stayed outside talking together. They laughed about small memories from their childhood. They shared stories about school and friends. Time seemed to move quickly when they talked. Moren did not realize how deeply she was beginning to trust him. To her, everything felt natural. After all, he was family to her best friend. What could possibly go wrong? But sometimes, life changes quietly. Sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who lead us into danger. As the weeks continued passing, the bond between Moren and David slowly grew stronger. And Moren never imagined that this growing closeness would soon lead her into a situation that would change her life forever. Very soon, a secret would appear, a secret that would bring fear, betrayal, and tragedy. And that secret would begin to grow silently inside Moren's life.
Life in the community continued the same way for many weeks. Every morning, people woke up early to begin their daily work. Traders arranged their goods by the roadside. Children prepared for school. The sound of motorcycles and voices filled the air. For Moren, life also seemed normal on the outside. She continued helping her mother at home and visiting her best friend Naza often. Whenever she went to Naza's house, she usually saw David there too. Over time, the connection between Moren and David became stronger. Their conversations became longer. Sometimes they laughed together about simple things. Other times they talked about serious matters like their hopes for the future. David spoke in a way that made Moren feel safe and understood. Whenever she shared something personal, he listened carefully. Moren began trusting him deeply. In her heart, she believed David truly cared about her. Because of that trust, Moren never thought about danger. She never imagined that the path she was walking on could lead her into trouble. One evening, after visiting Naza's house, Moren returned home feeling tired. She went to bed early that night. But the next morning, she noticed something strange. Her body did not feel the same. At first, she thought it was nothing serious. Maybe she was just tired from the day before. She ignored the feeling and continued with her daily work. But the strange feeling did not go away. Days passed, and Moren continued noticing small changes in her body. She became worried. At night, she lay awake thinking about what might be wrong. One afternoon, while sitting alone in her room, a thought suddenly entered her mind. The thought frightened her. At first, she tried to push it away, but the thought kept returning. Finally, Moren realized the truth. She was pregnant. The moment she understood this, her heart began beating very fast. Fear filled her mind. She felt confused and overwhelmed. She was not married. She did not know how her family would react if they discovered the truth. She imagined the disappointment on her mother's face. She imagined the whispers from neighbors in the community. Her mind became full of worry. For many hours she sat quietly, not knowing what to do. There was only one person she believed she could trust with this secret, Naza. Later that evening, Moren slowly walked to Naza's house. Her steps felt heavy as she walked down the familiar street. Children were playing football nearby, but she did not notice them. Her mind was full of fear.
When she arrived, Naza welcomed her inside. But Naza quickly noticed that something was wrong. Moren looked quiet and troubled. "What happened?" Naza asked gently. Moren hesitated for a moment. Her hands trembled slightly. Then slowly she began speaking. "I need to tell you something," she said softly. Naza listened carefully as Moren explained everything. When Moren finished speaking, the room became quiet. For a few seconds, Naza did not say anything. Moren waited nervously for her friend's reaction. Finally, Naza spoke. "Don't panic," she said calmly. Moren looked surprised. She had expected anger or shock. Instead, Naza appeared calm. "My brother and I will help you," Naza continued. "You don't need to worry." At that moment, David walked into the room. Naza quickly told Moren what Moren had just explained. David also remained calm. Instead of showing fear, he spoke in a reassuring voice. "Everything will be fine," he said. "We will find a way to solve this." Moren felt a small sense of relief hearing those words. She believed the two people she trusted most were ready to help her. That night, the three of them talked for a long time. Naza and David kept repeating that everything will be handled quietly. They told Moren she should not worry too much. They said they would think of a solution. Moren trusted them completely. She believed they cared about her. But even though Naza and David spoke calmly, something else was happening inside their minds. They were worried, very worried. David understood that if people discovered the pregnancy, it could cause serious problems for him. Naza also worried about what the community would say. Their thoughts slowly began turning toward a dangerous decision. But Moren did not know this. She left Naza's house later that night feeling slightly calmer. She believed her problem would soon be solved. As she walked home under the quiet night sky, she looked up at the moon and sighed softly. Maybe everything would be all right after all. But Moren did not know that the decision Naza and David were about to make would lead to tragedy. A decision that would destroy trust. A decision that would end a life. And a decision that would eventually create a story of mystery that the community would talk about for many years. Because soon, very soon, the night of betrayal was coming. After Moren told Naza and David about the pregnancy, the three of them began meeting more often to talk about what to do. At first, Moren felt relieved. She believed she was not alone anymore. Naza had promised to help her, and David also spoke calmly, telling her that everything would be fine. Moren trusted their words. She believed they were thinking about her safety and her future. But inside Naza and David's minds, something else was happening. They were afraid. David knew that if people discovered the pregnancy, the community would blame him. He imagined the anger of Moren's family and the shame it could bring to him and his sister. Naza also worried about what people in the neighborhood would say. The community was small and news traveled quickly. If the story became public, everyone would talk about it. Their fear slowly began turning into desperation. Instead of thinking about Moren's safety, they started thinking about how to make the problem disappear quietly. One evening, Moren visited Naza's house again. The air felt quiet and heavy that day. Even though the three of them sat in the same room, something about the atmosphere felt different. David was sitting quietly, looking serious. Naza also seemed unusually calm. After a few minutes, David finally spoke. "We have found a solution," he said. Moren looked at them with hope. "What solution?" she asked softly. Naza leaned closer to her. "There is something you can take," she said. "It will help end the pregnancy." Moren felt nervous hearing those words. She had heard stories about such things before, but she did not know much about them. "Is it safe?" she asked quietly. David nodded confidently. "Yes," he said quickly. "It will solve everything. You won't have to worry anymore." Naza also agreed. "Many people use it," she said. "After taking it, everything will go back to normal." Moren looked at both of them. She trusted them completely. They were the two people she believed cared about her the most, so she did not question them further. That evening, they gave her the pill. At first, everything seemed normal, but after some time, Moren began feeling uncomfortable. Her body felt weak. Her stomach hurt badly. She became dizzy and struggled to sit upright. Fear slowly entered her mind. "Naza," she whispered weakly, "I don't feel well." Naza looked worried, but she tried to stay calm. David also noticed that Maureen's condition was becoming serious. Maureen's breathing became heavy. Her face looked pale. She needed help immediately. She needed to be taken to a hospital. But instead of acting quickly, fear filled the room. David began pacing back and forth. "What are we going to do?" he asked nervously. Naza looked confused and frightened. "If we take her to the hospital, people will ask questions," she said. "They will want to know what happened." David's mind was racing. He imagined the police. He imagined the anger of Maureen's family. He imagined the shame that would follow. Their fear stopped them from making the right decision. Meanwhile, Maureen's condition became worse. She was too weak to speak clearly. Her body was struggling. Minutes passed. Then more minutes passed. But Naza and David did nothing except argue quietly about what to do. Finally, the room became silent. Maureen stopped moving. The realization slowly hit them. Maureen was gone. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence in the room felt heavy and frightening. Naza suddenly began crying loudly. "This cannot be happening," she said through tears. David looked shocked. His face became pale as he stared at the still figure in front of them. They both understood what had just happened. The situation had gone far beyond what they imagined. Maureen, the person who trusted them the most, had lost her life in their presence, and now they were terrified of what would happen next. After some time, David finally spoke. "If anyone finds out about this, we will be finished," he said quietly. Naza wiped her tears but continued crying. "What do we do now?" she asked. David thought carefully. His mind searched desperately for a solution. Finally, he made a decision. "We cannot let anyone know. We must hide what happened." Naza looked at him with fear. "What do you mean?" David explained his plan slowly. Late that night, when the streets became quiet, they would take Maureen away. They would drive far outside the city, somewhere no one would ever find her. At first, Naza hesitated. The idea sounded terrible, but fear controlled her thoughts. She agreed. Late that night, when the neighborhood had gone quiet, David and Naza carried Maureen's body into a car. The streets were dark and empty. The sound of the engine echoed softly as they drove away from the community. They drove far from Lagos until they reached a lonely place where an old abandoned house stood. The building had been empty for many years. Broken windows, faded walls, no people nearby. David stopped the car. Together, they carried Maureen inside. They placed her on the floor and stepped back. The silence inside the abandoned house felt heavy and cold. Without saying much, they quickly returned to the car. Within minutes, they were driving away, leaving Maureen behind. They believed their secret would stay hidden forever, but some secrets refused to stay buried, and what they had done that night would soon begin a chain of events that neither of them could escape. After leaving the abandoned house that night, David and Naza drove back toward Lagos in complete silence. The road was dark and quiet. Only the sound of the car engine filled the air. Neither of them wanted to talk. What they had just done weighed heavily on their minds. Naza stared through the window as the car moved through the empty road. Tears slowly rolled down her face. David kept his eyes on the road, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Both of them were afraid, but they believed the terrible secret they had created would remain hidden. When they finally arrived back at the community, the streets were silent. Most people were already asleep. David parked the car quietly. They stepped out and walked into the house without speaking. That night, neither of them slept well. Every time Naza closed her eyes, she remembered Maureen's weak voice asking for help. David also kept thinking about the abandoned house and the still body they had left behind. But the next morning, life in the community continued as if nothing had happened. People woke up early to begin their daily activities. Traders arranged goods in front of their small shops. Children walked to school wearing their uniforms. Motorcycles passed along the road carrying passengers. To everyone else, it looked like a normal day. But for Maureen's family, something was wrong. That morning, Maureen's mother noticed that her daughter had not returned home the previous night. At first, she was not too worried. Sometimes, Maureen spent extra time visiting friends or helping someone in the neighborhood. But as the hours passed, her mother became uneasy. By afternoon, Maureen still had not returned. Her mother began asking neighbors if anyone had seen her. "Did Maureen pass here today?" she asked a woman sitting outside a nearby shop. The woman shook her head. "No, I haven't seen her since yesterday," she replied. Maureen's mother continued asking around the neighborhood, but no one had seen her. As evening approached, worry filled her heart. She decided to visit Naza's house. After all, Maureen spent a lot of time there. When she arrived, Naza forced herself to act normal. "Good evening, Mama," Naza greeted politely. Maureen's mother looked concerned. "Have you seen Maureen today?" she asked. Naza felt her heart jump, but she quickly controlled herself. "No, Mama," she replied softly. "I haven't seen her since yesterday." Maureen's mother sighed deeply. "I was hoping she was here," she said. Naza tried to appear calm. "Maybe she visited another friend," she suggested. Maureen's mother nodded slowly, but something in her heart felt uneasy. She thanked Naza and walked back home. That night, Maureen's mother could not sleep. She kept wondering where her daughter could be. The next morning, the search began. Maureen's family started asking everyone in the community if they had seen her. Neighbors joined the search. Some people checked nearby markets. Others asked friends and relatives. But nobody had seen Maureen. Days passed and the search became larger. More people began talking about the disappearance. Some people believed Maureen might have traveled somewhere without telling anyone. Others believed something terrible might have happened. Eventually, the police were informed. Officers came to ask questions in the community. They spoke with Maureen's family. They asked neighbors if they noticed anything unusual. They also visited Naza's house. When the police asked her questions, Naza tried to stay calm. "Yes, Maureen visited me 2 days ago, but she left in the evening." The police wrote down her statement and moved on. David also acted normal whenever he saw people in the neighborhood. But inside, both of them lived with constant fear. Every time someone mentioned Maureen's name, their hearts beat faster. Weeks passed. The search slowly became quieter. There were no clues, no witnesses, no trace of where Maureen had gone. Eventually, the police investigation slowed down. Without evidence, there was little they could do. But Maureen's family refused to give up hope. Her mother prayed every day for her safe return. Sometimes she sat outside the house, looking down the street, hoping to see her daughter walking toward her. But Maureen never returned. Months passed. The story of her disappearance slowly became one of the biggest mysteries in the community. People spoke about it quietly. Some believed she ran away. Others believed something terrible might have happened. But the truth remained hidden. Meanwhile, David and Naza tried to live normal lives. They believed time would help people forget. But something strange soon began happening. Not long after the search became quiet, neighbors began hearing a strange sound at night. It sounded like a baby crying. The sound came from the trees near Naza's house. At first, people thought it was just an animal, but the sound returned again the next night, and the next night, and the next. Soon, people began to see something unusual in the tree branches. A small animal with very large shining eyes, a bush baby. But this bush baby behaved differently. Instead of running away quickly like most animals, it stayed in the same tree almost every night, watching, quietly staring toward Naza's house. No one in the community understood why, but the strange crying sound continued echoing through the night. And this was only the beginning of something far more mysterious that was about to unfold. Months had passed since Maureen disappeared. At first, the entire community had talked about her disappearance every day. People searched many places and asked many questions. But as time passed and no answers were found, the search slowly became quiet. Life in the neighborhood continued. Children still played football in the dusty streets. Women still sat outside their houses in the evening, talking and laughing while preparing food. Motorcycles still passed through the road carrying passengers, but Maureen's family never forgot her. Her mother still hoped that one day her daughter would return home. Sometimes in the evening she sat outside the house, looking down the street, hoping to see Maureen walking toward her, but that moment never came. Meanwhile, Naza and David continued living their lives as if nothing had happened. On the outside, they appeared normal, but inside, both of them carried a heavy secret. Sometimes, when Naza sat quietly alone, she remembered Maureen's weak voice asking for help. Sometimes, David remembered the abandoned house and the silence inside it. They tried not to think about it. They believed that with time, people would forget about Maureen. But something strange soon began happening. One night, a neighbor who lived close to Naza's house heard a strange sound. The sound came from the trees outside. At first, the woman thought it was a baby crying. Wah! Wah! The sound was soft but clear. The woman stepped outside her house and looked around, but there was no baby anywhere. The sound continued coming from the tree branches. The woman looked up. There, sitting on a branch, was a small animal. It had very large shining eyes and a long tail. It was a bush baby. Bush babies were not completely unusual in some quiet areas, but people did not often see them so close to houses. The woman watched the animal for a few seconds. Then, the bush baby jumped from one branch to another and disappeared into the darkness. The woman returned inside her house, thinking nothing more about it. But the next night, something else happened again. The same crying sound returned. Wah! Wah! This time, another neighbor also heard it. Soon, several people stepped outside their houses to see where the sound was coming from. Again, they saw the same small animal sitting in the tree near Naza's house. The bush baby looked down quietly at the people below. Its large eyes reflected the light from nearby houses. For several moments, the animal stayed there, watching silently. Then, it jumped into another tree and disappeared. People began talking about it. Some laughed and said it was only an animal. Others said it was strange for the bush baby to return to the same place 2 nights in a row. But the strange visits did not stop. Night after night, the crying sound returned. Always from the same trees, always near Naza's house. Soon, it became something people expected to hear after sunset. Some neighbors even joked about it. That bush baby must like this street, one man said one evening. But not everyone found it funny. Naza began noticing the strange animal too. The first time she saw it clearly was one evening when she stepped outside to throw away some trash. As she looked up, she saw 2 glowing eyes staring at her from the tree branches. Her heart jumped. She froze for a moment. Then the bush baby made the crying sound again. Wah! Wah! A strange feeling passed through her body. The sound made her feel uncomfortable. She quickly went back inside the house. But that night she could not sleep well. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the same crying sound outside. The next night, it happened again. And the next. Soon, the strange animal began appearing more often. Sometimes it sat quietly on the tree branches outside her window. Sometimes it jumped from tree to tree but always stayed near the house. Whenever Naza stepped outside, she sometimes saw the bush baby watching her. The way the animal looked at her made her feel uneasy. It was as if the animal recognized her, or as if it was waiting for something. Meanwhile, David also began hearing the strange crying sound at night. At first, he ignored it, but one evening, while returning home late, he saw something that made him stop walking. The bush baby was sitting on a tree branch directly above the road. Its eyes were shining in the darkness. For a moment, David felt uncomfortable. The animal seemed to be staring directly at him. He shook his head and continued walking. It's just an animal, he said quietly to himself. But the strange feeling did not leave him. Soon, other people in the community also began talking about the bush baby. Many noticed that it always appeared in the same area. Some people believed it was just coincidence, but the older people in the neighborhood had a different opinion. One elderly woman quietly said one evening, "Sometimes animals come near houses for a reason." "What kind of reason?" someone asked. The old woman looked toward the trees and spoke slowly. Sometimes spirits find ways to return. Her words made some people laugh, but others felt a small chill inside their hearts. Meanwhile, the bush baby continued returning every night, watching, waiting, and slowly the peaceful silence of the community was beginning to turn into something darker, because very soon something terrible was going to happen, and the strange bush baby in the trees would be at the center of it.
As the weeks passed, the strange bush baby continued appearing near Naza's house almost every night. At first, people in the community treated it like a small curiosity. Some neighbors even stood outside their houses just to see the animal when they heard its strange cry. But slowly, the situation began to feel uncomfortable. The bush baby did not behave like a normal animal. Usually, bush babies moved quickly from tree to tree and disappeared into the forest or dark areas far from people's homes. But this one was different. It stayed near the same place every night, always in the trees close to Naza's house, always watching quietly. The sound it made also began to disturb people. The cry sounded like a baby calling in the darkness. Wah, wah. Sometimes the sound was soft. Other times it echoed loudly through the quiet street. Children began feeling scared when they heard the sound. Some mothers told their children to come inside early in the evening. Don't stay outside too late, one woman warned her son. That strange animal is making people uncomfortable. But the person who felt the most fear was Naza. At first she tried to ignore the bush baby. She told herself it was only an animal, but the strange feeling inside her heart refused to go away. Almost every night she heard the cry outside her window. Sometimes the sound was so close that it woke her from sleep. She would sit up in her bed, her heart beating fast, listening to the sound. Wah, wah. The cry seemed to follow her. One night, she finally gathered courage and looked through the window. Under the moonlight, she saw the bush baby sitting on a branch. Its large eyes shone brightly in the darkness. The animal was staring directly toward her window. Naza quickly stepped back. A cold feeling ran through her body. It felt as if the animal was watching her for a reason. From that night on, Naza began having terrible dreams. In her dreams, she saw Moren standing in a dark place. Moren did not speak. She simply looked at Naza with sad eyes. Each time, Naza woke up sweating and frightened. Her sleep became restless. Even during the day, she often felt uneasy. Meanwhile, David also began noticing strange things. At first, he ignored the bush baby, but soon he started hearing the crying sound whenever he returned home late at night. Sometimes the sound seemed to move from tree to tree as he walked. The feeling of being watched began following him. One night, David was walking home after visiting a friend. The road was quiet. Most houses had already turned off their lights. As he walked under a tall tree, he heard the familiar cry. Wah, wah. He stopped walking and looked up. There, sitting on a branch above him, was the bush baby. Its eyes glowed brightly under the moonlight. For a moment, David felt uncomfortable. The animal did not run away. Instead, it continued staring directly at him. David shook his head and continued walking. It's just an animal, he said quietly, but deep inside, a strange feeling remained. A few days later, something even stranger happened. David was walking down the road again at night when he suddenly felt something move above him. He looked up quickly. The bush baby was jumping from branch to branch in the trees above the road. It seemed to be following him. David walked faster, but the animal continued moving along the trees above him. Jump, jump, jump. Finally, he reached his house and quickly went inside. His heart was beating faster than normal. Even though he tried to act calm, the experience disturbed him. When he told Naza about it, she became quiet. She had also been feeling uneasy about the bush baby, but neither of them wanted to say what they were both secretly thinking. The truth was something they both feared. Deep inside their minds, the memory of Moren had never completely disappeared. Sometimes they remembered the abandoned house far outside the city. Sometimes they remembered the terrible night when everything changed. The guilt they tried to hide was still alive inside them. And now the strange bush baby seemed to appear every night, almost as if it was reminding them of something they wanted to forget. Meanwhile, Neighbors in the community also noticed something unusual. The bush baby rarely appeared anywhere else. It stayed almost entirely in the trees near Naza's house. Some people began whispering about it. "Why does that animal stay in that place every night?" one neighbor asked. Another woman shrugged. "Maybe it found food there." But an elderly man who lived nearby had a different opinion. One evening, he spoke quietly while watching the trees. He said, "Sometimes animals come close to people when something is not right." "What do you mean?" someone asked. The old man looked toward the branches where the bush baby sat. He said, "Sometimes the spirit of someone who suffered returns in a different form." He said slowly. Some people laughed when they heard his words, but others felt a chill. That same night, something terrible was about to happen, and the bush baby watching from the trees would soon be connected to an event that the entire community will never forget. Because very soon, the first punishment for betrayal was about to take place.
The strange bush baby had now become a normal part of the night in the community. Almost every evening, after the sun disappeared and the streets became quiet, the same crying sound could be heard from the trees. Wah, wah. Some people had become used to it. Others still felt uncomfortable whenever they heard it. But the person who felt the most uneasy was David. Even though he tried to act strong and fearless, the strange animal had begun disturbing his thoughts. Almost every night, he heard the crying sound when he returned home. Sometimes he felt like something was watching him. Sometimes he even imagined footsteps behind him, but whenever he turned around, there was no one there. The only thing he sometimes saw was the bush baby sitting on a tree branch, its bright eyes staring quietly at him. David kept telling himself it was just his imagination, but deep inside, something about the situation made him nervous. One evening, David left the house to visit a friend in another part of the neighborhood. He stayed there for several hours. They talked, laughed, and listened to music. For a while, David forgot about the strange things happening at night. But when he finally decided to return home, it was already very late. Most people in the community had gone to sleep. The streets were almost empty. Only a few lights shone from the windows of houses. David walked slowly down the quiet road. The night air was cool and the sky above him was clear. For a moment, everything seemed peaceful. Then suddenly, he heard the sound again. Wah, wah. David stopped walking. The sound came from the trees nearby. His heart beat a little faster. He looked up. There it was, the bush baby. The small animal was sitting on a branch above the road, looking down at him. Its eyes reflected the moonlight. For a moment, the two of them simply stared at each other. David felt a strange chill. He shook his head and continued walking. "It's just an animal," he said quietly to himself again. But as he walked further down the road, the strange feeling returned. He felt like he was not alone. Then he heard movement above him. Jump, jump, jump. The bush baby was moving through the branches, following the same direction he was walking. David stopped again and looked up. The animal paused on a branch. Its eyes were still focused on him. Now David felt uncomfortable. "Go away," he muttered, but the bush baby did not move. After a few seconds, it jumped to another branch. David turned and continued walking faster. The road ahead of him was dark. Street lights were far apart, leaving many areas in shadow. As he walked under another tree, the crying sound returned. Wah, wah. This time it sounded louder, almost angry. David looked up again. The bush baby was now sitting directly above him. The large eyes seemed brighter than before. For a moment, David felt something he could not explain. Fear. Real fear. He quickly stepped away from the tree and continued walking, but the strange feeling grew stronger. The night suddenly felt colder. The road felt emptier, and the silence between the sounds of the bush baby's cries felt heavy. Suddenly, the bush baby jumped down to a lower branch. The movement surprised David. He stepped backward. "Leave me alone," he said loudly, but the animal continued watching him. Then something unexpected happened. The bush baby jumped again, David stumbled backward in shock. His foot slipped on the uneven ground beside the road. He tried to balance himself, but the fall came suddenly. His body hit the ground hard. For a moment, he struggled to get up, but something inside him felt terribly wrong. He tried to call for help, but his voice came out weak. The road remained empty. The houses nearby were silent. Above him, the bush baby remained sitting quietly on the branch, watching. Several minutes passed. Then everything became still. The bush baby made one last cry. Wah, wah. Later that night, a man returning home from work walked along the same road. He noticed someone lying near the side of the street. The man stopped and looked closer. It was David. He was not moving. The man quickly called other neighbors. Soon, several people gathered around. Someone called for help, but when they checked him carefully, they realized something terrible had already happened. David was gone. The news spread quickly through the community the next morning. Many people were shocked. Some believed it had slipped and fallen badly during the night. Others said it was strange that no one heard anything. But one detail made the story even more mysterious. A neighbor who lived nearby said he saw something unusual when he came outside earlier that night. He had seen a small animal sitting quietly in the tree above the place where David was found. The same animal people had been seeing for weeks. The bush baby. The story spread quickly. Some people laughed and said it was only coincidence, but others began whispering something different. They began wondering if the strange animal in the trees was more than just an animal. Because after David's death, the bush baby did not disappear. Instead, its cries in the night became even louder. And now, there was only one person left who had been part of the terrible secret, Naza. And the bush baby had not finished its work yet. After David's death, the entire community was filled with fear and confusion. People gathered in small groups outside their houses, whispering about what had happened. Some believed David's death was only a terrible accident. Others were not so sure. Many people could not stop talking about the strange bush baby that had been appearing near Naza's house for many weeks. Some neighbors said the animal was seen in the trees on the same night David died. Others said they heard its cry shortly before the news spread. Wah, wah. That strange sound had now become something nobody could ignore. But no one was more troubled than Naza. David was her brother. Even though she had been living in fear for a long time, his death shook her deeply. After the burial, Naza returned home feeling empty inside. The house felt too quiet. The room where David used to sit now felt cold and strange. At night, she could not sleep. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw her brother lying still on the ground. Then she saw Moren, standing far away in darkness, watching her without speaking. Naza would wake up suddenly, breathing fast, her body covered in sweat. Outside her window, the night would be silent for a few seconds. Then the sound would come again. Wah, wah. The bush baby had returned. The first night after David's burial, Naza sat up in bed and listened carefully. The cry sounded closer than ever before. Her heart beat fast. She slowly stood up and walked toward the window. Her hands were shaking. When she pulled the curtain slightly aside, she froze. The bush baby was sitting on the branch of the tree nearest to her room. Its large eyes were glowing in the moonlight. It was not moving. It was simply staring at her. Naza quickly stepped away from the window and covered her mouth with her hand. A deep fear entered her heart. From that night, everything changed. The bush baby no longer appeared only sometimes. Now it seemed to be everywhere around her. When she woke up in the morning, she sometimes found strange claw marks on the ground outside the house. When she stepped outside in the evening, she often heard movement in the trees above her. At night, the crying sound came again and again. Sometimes it sounded far, sometimes it sounded so close that she felt it was right beside her. Naza stopped sleeping properly. She stopped eating well too. Her face began to look tired and weak. Neighbors noticed that she was changing. One woman who lived nearby said quietly to another, "Naza does not look like herself again." The other woman nodded. "She's always looking over her shoulder now," she said, "and she hardly talks to anyone." The truth was that Naza was no longer living in peace. Fear followed her everywhere. One afternoon, she went to the market to buy food. As she walked past a line of small shops, she suddenly heard the familiar sound, "Wah!" She stopped immediately. The sound was soft, but she knew it well. Her eyes quickly searched the area. Then she saw it. The bush baby was sitting on the roof of a small building nearby, staring down at her. Naza dropped the bag in her hand. People around her turned in surprise. "What happened?" one woman asked. But Naza could not answer. She quickly picked up her bag and hurried away from the market. When she got home, her hands were still shaking. That evening, she locked all the windows and doors very early. She sat inside trying to calm herself. But after the sky grew dark, the crying began again. Wah, wah. Naza covered her ears. Still, the sound seemed to enter her mind. That night, she had another dream. In the dream, she was standing inside the abandoned house, far from Lagos. The room was dark and cold. At first, she was alone. Then slowly, she saw someone lying on the floor. It was Moren. Naza tried to move backward, but her feet would not move. Then Moren slowly stood up. Her face looked sad, not angry. That made the dream even more frightening. Moren did not shout. She only looked at Naza and asked one question in a soft voice. Why? Naza woke up screaming. Her neighbors heard her voice and came outside. Some knocked on her door asking if she was all right, but Naza did not answer. She sat on the bed shaking while tears rolled down her face. From that night, she began seeing Moren even when she was awake. Sometimes she would be sitting alone in the room and suddenly feel as if someone was standing behind her. When she turned, no one was there. Other times, she would catch sight of a shadow in the corner of her eye, a shape that looked like a woman standing silently. And always, not long after, the cry of the bush baby would follow. Days passed and her fear became worse. People in the neighborhood started talking openly. Some believed Naza was losing her mind because of grief over David's death. Others believed something deeper was happening. An old woman who lived nearby said quietly one evening, "That girl is being troubled by a spirit," she said. "Somebody who died without peace is asking for justice." Those words spread through the neighborhood, and with every passing day, Naza became more broken. She could no longer carry the secret in peace. The guilt inside her heart grew heavier and heavier. She remembered the night Moren begged weakly for help. She remembered how she and David chose fear instead of doing the right thing. She remembered the drive to the abandoned house. She remembered leaving Moren there. All those memories now returned every day and every night. One evening, when the sky grew dark and rain clouds gathered above the community, Naza sat alone in the house. The wind blew strongly outside. Tree branches moved against the windows. Then she heard the cry again. Wah! Wah! This time, it sounded different. It sounded louder, closer, almost inside the room. Naza stood up in fear. The window suddenly shook as if something had landed on it. She looked toward it and screamed. The bush baby was there, its face pressed close to the window, its bright eyes fixed on her. Naza stumbled backward and fell on the floor. Then, in that same moment, she heard another sound. A voice, soft, sad, but clear. "Tell them." Naza covered her ears and cried loudly. "No," she shouted. But the voice came again. "Tell them." The wind grew stronger outside. The crying of the bush baby became louder and louder. Naza began weeping helplessly on the floor. She now understood one thing clearly. The fear would never stop. The bush baby would never leave her. Not until the truth came out. Not until Moren's family heard what really happened. And so, with her heart full of terror and guilt, Naza made the decision she had been avoiding for so long. She would go to Moren's family. She would tell them everything, and she would finally confess the terrible secret that had destroyed all their lives.
That night, after seeing the bush baby on her window and hearing the strange voice, Naza could no longer live with the secret. Her heart was full of fear. Her mind was tired. For many months, she had tried to hide the truth about what happened to Moren, but now the guilt had become too heavy. The strange animal that appeared every night seemed to be reminding her of the terrible things she had done. She knew one thing clearly. The fear would never stop until she told the truth. Early the next morning, the sky was still grey and quiet when Naza left her house. She had not slept at all that night. Her eyes were red from crying. Her body felt weak, but she forced herself to walk. Step by step, she moved through the streets of the community. Some people who saw her noticed something strange about her. She looked nervous and disturbed, but no one stopped her. Naza was walking toward only one place, Moren's family house. As she got closer, her heart began beating faster. Memories filled her mind. She remembered the day she and Moren first became friends.
She remembered their laughter and the many evenings they spent talking together. She remembered how Moren trusted her completely. Tears rolled down her face as she walked. Soon she reached the house. Moren's mother was sitting outside with two relatives. They were talking quietly. When they saw Naza approaching, they looked surprised. Naza stopped in front of them. For a moment she could not speak. Her mouth felt dry. Her body began shaking. Moren's mother looked at her carefully. "Naza, what is wrong?" she asked. The moment those words were spoken, Naza broke down. She fell to her knees and began crying loudly. The family members stood up in shock. "Naza, what is happening?" one of them asked. But Naza could not control her tears. She cried for several minutes before finally speaking. "I cannot hide it anymore," she said through her tears. Moren's mother felt a strange fear inside her heart. "What are you talking about?" she asked slowly. Naza took a deep breath. Then she began telling the truth. She told them about the day Moren came to her with the secret about the pregnancy. She told them how David had promised to help. She told them about the pill they gave Moren. As she continued speaking, the faces of Moren's family members slowly changed. Shock, pain, anger. When Naza explained how Moren became weak and needed help, Moren's mother began crying. But the most painful moment came when Naza revealed the final truth. "We were afraid," she said. "We did not take her to the hospital." The family stood frozen. Then Naza spoke the words they never expected to hear. "She died, and we took her far away." Moren's mother screamed in pain. Other relatives held her as she cried loudly. The pain of hearing the truth was almost too much to bear. But Naza was not finished. She told them everything. She told them about the car ride that night. She told them about the abandoned house far outside Lagos. She told them how they left Moren there. When she finished speaking, the entire place was silent except for the sound of Moren's mother crying. Naza remained on her knees, shaking. "I am sorry," she said again and again. "I am sorry." Just then, something strange happened. From the tall tree near the house came a familiar sound. Wah, wah. Everyone turned their heads toward the tree. There, sitting on one of the branches, was the small animal people in the community had been talking about for weeks, the bush baby. Its large eyes shone brightly in the daylight. It sat quietly, looking toward the house. For a moment, nobody spoke. The strange animal made the crying sound again. Wah, wah. Moren's mother slowly lifted her head. She looked at the bush baby for several seconds. Then she spoke softly. "My daughter has been crying for justice." At that moment, Naza began crying even harder. She understood something clearly now. The fear that had followed her every night had not been meaningless. It was the weight of the truth she had tried to hide. Soon after that day, the police were informed about Naza's confession. Officers came to question her and investigate the abandoned house she had described. But one thing the community would never forget was the strange story of the bush baby. Even after Naza was taken away, some neighbors said they still saw the small animal sitting quietly in the trees at night. But the crying sound was no longer filled with anger. It was softer, almost peaceful. Many people in that community began believing something mysterious had happened. They believed Moren's spirit had returned to demand the truth, and when the truth finally came out, the spirit found peace. Today, people in that community still tell the story. They tell it as a warning about betrayal, a warning about secrets, and a reminder that no matter how deeply the truth is buried, one day it will always come out, and justice will sometimes come in ways no one can explain, even through the quiet eyes of a small bush baby watching from the trees. The lesson from Moren's story is that betrayal, selfish decisions, and hiding the truth can destroy many lives, but no matter how long a secret is hidden, the truth will always find a way to come out, and justice will eventually follow. and thank you for watching this emotional story on AfroTales TV. Please like this video, share it with your friends and family, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next powerful African story.